lucky man. I'm the most fortunate of men to have been sent to prison, to have suffered like I did, because I'm here today. And I'll soon have 43 years of sobriety, and that's a miracle, man. Prison, I had a pair of prison-issue shoes by the Kansas State Penitentiary outfit. They issued me some brogans, and I wanted to paint that dome, green dome. I wanted to paint it gold because I thought it would be easier to see and people would recognize it easier. And I got up there and painted that dome gold, but I got my shoes all gold too. I didn't have money to buy another pair of shoes, and one time I was sitting in the club, Shrine on the Hill, and this guy said, "Who's that guy over there with the gold shoes?" And that's when I decided that from there on I was going to wear gold shoes to AA meetings, because people recognize you by your gold shoes. Cling to the thought. I love that phrase. Cling to the thought that in God's hands our dark past is the greatest possession that we have. With it, you can keep other people from going through the same ups and downs that you have gone through just by telling them about it. I can remember my father holding me in his left arm.
Just a baby.
I was just a baby. And my mother was hollering at him from the doorway of the house. And my dad was hollering back at him, at her. And I was afraid that he was hurting my mother, or going to do something to my mother. And I reached over and bit him right here on the cheek. And when my father died, he died in 1934. I never noticed it before, but I noticed that my mother and and Brother Joe were standing there at the casket, and the lid was open. And I could look down and I could see my teeth marks in my father's cheek. We had a cellar, it was, when the basement was a cellar. My father made home brew. That was during the Prohibition, and he made home brew. And it was good home brew. It was the best home brew in town. I've been told that many times. And everybody was saying what good home brew it was and what a wonderful guy my dad was, and yet my dad would get drunk on that home brew and come home and beat me. And that's another thing I never understood. Wow, how he could beat two people at once. At the same time, people loved him, and yet he'd come home and beat me out for nothing, absolutely nothing. Anyway, I went down there one day and scraped the foam or scum off the top of the crock and took a drink out of that
get drunk?
And I passed out on the floor there beside. I think I was born an alcoholic. Well, I used to drink a lot, and I used to be the kind of a kid. In the first place, I had to take the pledge one time over at church in the altar of Sacred Heart Church in Kansas City on Virginia Avenue. For 10 months, sober, I didn't drink, because I thought that if I did, I'd break that pledge and I'd go to hell. But then I broke the pledge. But during that 10 months, I was half nuts. I remember walking the streets at night, and my hair would be standing straight up on my head. I'd have goose pimples on my head. I was afraid. I was scared to death of everything, paranoid as hell. And then I took a drink, and I got over that. Drinking caused me to be a different type of guy, just like my father. I used to drive an old 34 Oakland for a bunch of people up in the women that lived on 15th Street down there. They were the prostitutes, but they were sure good to me. I was an ornery little old kid. I used to get drunk and be ashamed to go home, so I'd go down there in the basement, and they used to bring their Johns down there and dance with them, and, you know, drink with them and all. And there was an old boy there that used to play the piano, and I used to just love that old guy. His name was Dempsey Reed. He was an old colored guy, great guy, bald-headed as hell. Wonderful old guy. It was good to remember people like him. He died in my arms. We moved down to an apartment house. That's where I met my future sponsor, George Patrick. They had 2 beer joints.
You used to see him in the bars.
Yeah.
You hated him.
Sitting at the end of the bar, hated his guts. He had a monkey, and that monkey was a no-good, lousy little monkey. He used to steal the change off the bar and throw it at you, and throw it around, steal it. You know, and it'd just scare you to death, unless you got drunk. He had a sonorous voice, just like a preacher. And people used to look up to him because he was knowledgeable and intelligent. And I just despised him because he never bought a drink. A couple times George and I went out when we would find somebody that we needed to rob. We thought had some money in the bank or had a floor safe or something like that. We'd go out and rob it. And
is that when you started that? Cracking safes?
That's when I started cracking safes. I volunteered because it was either that or go to Missouri Penitentiary in Jefferson City for a year. 211 consecutive days on the front lines. And then we got R&R for supposedly 24 hours, but we didn't even get back until they called us back up when they had the Battle of the Bulge. We hit the beach D-Day in France, and that was Omaha Beach. I was always making, everybody had to look out for, I was always doing something that was getting us in trouble. You know, I was always, everybody said, stay away from Peterson because that's where the war is.
What's going on with your drinking during this time?
Yeah, well,
are you drinking steadily all this time?
Yeah, all the time.
All the time. So you get out of the military.
I never remember ever any time when I was ever sober. Never. I had 5, that's 15 quarts of vodka in the back of my half track, and everybody was wondering how in the L.O. Peterson can stay drunk. I was sitting on the trail of our 90mm gun, and this guy come up and tapped me on the shoulder. He was a major. Said, "I understand you're a safecracker." He said, "Come with me." So I went with him. This whole bunch of GIs would go get safes out of the various office buildings, and they'd bring them down to the middle of town where they had a pump and everything down there. And we used to, that's where I learned how to drill a safe and how to blow a safe and how to peel a safe and how to punch a safe and how to really break into a safe. When I got out of the service, I went to Liberal, Kansas, where my mother had married another guy. And I went down there, and of course, I went to work for J.C. Penney, but hell, I couldn't hold a job.
You drinking it all up?
Yeah. I was awful. And I'd drink anything, anywhere, anytime. I pulled a lot of shenanigans in there around Liberal. Even went one time to Nebraska, because I found out there was a safe there that I wanted to see what was in it. I had an old 1939 Chevrolet green with a great big trunk on the back of it, and that's where I kept my tools. I couldn't stay sober, and I had a lot of bank bags full of checks that weren't cashed.
That you just lifted, came out of the safe.
Yeah. And I was on parole. And my parole officer was named Hargrove. And I was hiding from him. And I had been sleeping underneath a bandstand in the city park in Hutchinson, Kansas. And I took the last bottle of beer. It was a bottle of red, white, and blue beer. And I drank that, and I just threw the bottle down. And a cop came by. They were looking for me. And picked me up and put me in the city jail in Hutchinson. And I was in there about 3 days and went into DTs. And they didn't know what DTs were, so they turned the fire hose on me and pinned me up against the wall. And I don't see how I lived through that. And I went to prison back up to Lansing. And I was in the holding cell, and I was crazier than hell in the DTs and hollering and screaming. And they took me out of there and took all my clothes off and put me in the hole. I was in there with no clothes on for a year. They fed me macaroni twice a day, and they used to shave me with a pair of scissors. God, I was screaming and hollering and crazy as hell. And I'd scream. I used to think I was screaming, but I wasn't screaming. I couldn't scream because I'd squeak. My voice, I lost my voice. And they rolled some tear gas in there underneath the door. And they used to do that too every 8 hours. Every time they changed a shift, they'd roll a few more, another one of them little canisters of tear gas in there. And that caused me to have my eyes swole up. I lost all my fingernails and all my hair, and I was raw, and my feet were raw, and my fingers were just raw, and my eyes were swollen shut. My nose and lips my teeth were loose. I was in a hell of a shape. They carried me out of there by one arm and one leg and put me in the hospital. Can't hear nothing, think I'm still in DTs, having auditory hallucinations. And I was hearing these children I heard the little children laugh and sing and cry and holler, and I got up on my bed, got a chair, folding chair, and got up there and looked out that window, and I could just, if I was on my tiptoes, I could just barely see over the wall. And over the wall was this playground. And I kept getting up there every day. And one day I remember looking out there and feeling sad, still glad I could see and I was alive. But I looked out there and I said to myself, I said, I used to be a child like that. I wonder what happened to me. And then I said, God help me. And you know, I think that's the first time I ever said an honest prayer. And I said that prayer, and he started helping me. I had a mask over my face because they thought I was tubercular, and they didn't want the population of the prison to be getting tuberculosis. So they put a mask over my face, and I had one eye covered, and I didn't have any hair, and I had scars, scabs all over me. And he said, hey, Pete, there's some guys coming up here from the Shrine on the Hill in Kansas City, Kansas. They call themselves Alcoholics Anonymous. They're going to hold some meetings. I went to those meetings on Sunday at 1:30, and I was sitting there, and an old boy walked in and walked right by me, and he turned around, and he had a beautiful head of white hair. He had a shirt, and a white shirt and a tie on, beautiful suit, and his shoes were shined, and he was wearing socks. And he said to me, he said, Jimmy Peterson, you're going to die in here. And I recognized the voice. It was old George Patrick. And I knew right then that I had a friend. It's a wonderful thing to know that inside of that penitentiary, although I was locked up for 5 years, I found freedom. And I found God. George Patrick met me at the gate and took me to this place, which is the Shrine on the Hill. I went to work there for $10 a week and board and room. And when I walked in there, I knew I had a place to stay the rest of my life. I knew that I was home. Except sobriety. So if someone wants what you've got, give it to them. There's many people out there in the world who I probably robbed. I don't even know who they are. But the way I make my amends, which is in the 9th step, the way I make my 9th step amends to those people is by giving what I've got away to others. I don't know where I'd be if I hadn't followed what George Patrick told me about the absolutes of Alcoholics Anonymous. They were founded in They're embodied in the principles of these 12 steps. Those 4 absolutes: absolute honesty, absolute purity of motive, absolute unselfishness, and unconditionally loving everybody. And this book saved my life. And I have been, today is this month, on December the 16th, this month, I will have had 43 years of solid sobriety in Alcoholics Anonymous. And that's a miracle. And I haven't been in jail. I haven't been in prison. I haven't robbed anybody. I'm a lucky man. We in Alcoholics Anonymous have a job. And that job is on page 102. It says, your job now is to be at the place where you may be of maximum helpfulness to others. So never fear to go to the most sordid place on the face of the earth if you can be helpful. Stay on the firing line of life with these motives, and God will keep you unharmed. That paragraph probably rules my life more today than anything I do. It's very important that we as sober alcoholics, when talking to a newcomer, please, in the name of God, our higher power, tell them about your past, because somewhere in the world there is somebody that you can help by telling them how you got here and what happened and what it's like now. I think one of the biggest lessons I ever learned, I learned in prison. And there was a guy who had been in Alcoholics Anonymous a long time before he joined the group, I think 2 weeks before he got out of prison. And then he got out. His name was Red Day. Everybody thought Red Day was going to make it because he had the help of Alcoholics Anonymous. And he and a guy by the name of Ralph Iskrig were stealing drip gas from one of the lines. And the line rider came by and caught him. And Red Day was carrying a gun. He pulled out the gun and killed the line rider. They caught him. And Red Day was sent back to prison with death. He was on death row. And I was standing there when Iskrig, who had gotten life, was standing on the sidewalk between the hospital and death row. And Red hollered out to Ralph Iskrig. He said, Ralph, do you know what happened to me? He said, no, Red. What happened to you? And Red, at the top of his lungs, said, I took that first drink. And I'll never forget that. That taught me a lesson too. I'm very fortunate to have been there when that happened, because I can very easily not remember that at the wrong time.
Yeah.
thought that in God's hands, our dark past is the greatest possession that we have.